Hello, everyone, and welcome. Really good to see you. We're just letting everyone in. Thank you so much again for joining us today. It's great to see so many people have signed up, um, and lovely for you to give up your time to be with us today. Um, if you want to pop in the chat just as people are joining where you're from, and your name, that would be lovely. Hi, nice to see you all. Thank you for joining. We're just letting everyone in before we kick off. Let me just see if I can see everyone. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Thank you for making it. Hello, hello, and welcome. That's great. Have we got any more to let in there, Georgia? There's still people coming? No? All right, lovely. Well, in the interests of time, as you know, this is all quite a snappy session. If you haven't been to a learning lunch before, then we have around a 15-minute intro from our speakers who will give you a provocation, and then we get together in breakout rooms and hopefully connect to make new connections and new friendships while we're here as well. So today we've got our co-chair Holly and Rachel Musson. That's Holly Everett and Rachel Musson. And Holly is Director of Community at ThoughtBox and Rachel is Director of Education. And they're both former teachers. Rachel and Holly are now working with a global network of educators to embed a culture of care into the heart of learning. And they focus on the idea of self-care, people care, and earth care, which they're going to tell you all about. They're also known as two inconvenient women, but I'll let them tell you exactly why that may be. So thank you so much for joining us both today. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the triple well-being. Over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Welcome, everyone. Really lovely to be here. As an inconvenient woman, I am always delighted to be co-hosting with Holly, the other inconvenient woman. We have a podcast series that's called Two Inconvenient Women, which we'll share a link to later, where we just explore some of the inconvenient questions and truths of our world. But today, hopefully something a little bit more convenient. We wanted to just dive into the triple wellbeing approach as a follow-on really from Morgan's provocation last month of looking at how we can transform our education systems to create a different culture, a culture that puts the well-being of people and planet at the heart of our learning and our lives. And so we're going to do a very quick deep dive, as Kathy said, and then have some exploration in breakout rooms. But if okay, I'd like to invite us to take a little moment to sort of metaphorically zoom out a little bit from the seat that we're sitting in, the community that we're part of, the world that we're in, out almost into sort of not cyberspace, outer space, and look back in for a moment onto humans on planet Earth, and see how we're doing. And I think we'll all probably agree, not so well. And if we have a little look at that larger picture of what's going on for us all right around the world, we are struggling right now with so many what we can call symptoms of a world in crisis. And I'd like to just look very briefly at those bigger symptoms. We're seeing increasing levels of personal ill health. When we're seeing both in our schools and in our communities growing levels of physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional ill health. We're seeing increasing levels of what we can call societal ill health. We've got growing levels of inequality, fragmentation, and othering happening in our communities. And we've got ever increasing levels of environmental ill health with our growing climate and nature crisis. And when we start to look at the symptoms in this way, we can think of these as what is often called the polycrisis, which may be a term that you've come across. The polycrisis referencing the idea that there seems to be multiple overwhelming crises. I mean, turn on the news at any point on any day, and we're just being hit with those flashing red warning signs of more problems to worry about. And when we start to really dig into these crises that we're seeing in our schools, in our contexts, in our communities right across the world, we can see that they are actually intersectional, But even more than that, there is something underpinning them. And the depth research that we've been doing over the last 10 years at ThoughtBox, and that many, many, many practitioners right across the world have been doing, all come back to the idea of this meta crisis, of there being something underpinning all of these crises that we're facing in our human experience. And that is a crisis, and it's given different names sometimes, but it's all the same thing, a crisis of connection. What has happened over time, over human evolution, and particularly over the last couple of 100 years, is we've gradually disconnected from ourselves, we've gradually disconnected from each other, and we've gradually disconnected from the natural world, to the point now that we have almost sort of disembodied heads with bodies that carry us around, in a very limited connection with our spiritual wellness, our emotions, our whole sense of person. We have this growing othering happening with our communities, and we perhaps relate to the natural world as something to exploit or pollute or extract from, rather than part of us. And what we can start to look at, and we can share the depth research that we've got in our free ebook on this, what we can start to look at in this meta crisis is that if over time we've disconnected from ourselves, each other, and nature, the healing response, or I don't like the word solution, the way forward is to actually reconnect. What happens if we start reconnecting with ourselves, reconnecting with each other, and reconnecting with the rest of the natural world? We can start to build or rebuild these caring communities, focusing on self-care and really nurturing and cultivating those inner foundations of flourishing. We can start to focus on people care and the idea of building these caring communities. And we can focus ourselves onto earth care, restoring, revitalizing, rewilding planetary health. Now, when we start to think about taking on the symptoms of the world, that can feel obviously really overwhelming. But this comes right back down to how we're showing up in our own lives and the way that we're shifting our own practices to create healthier futures for people and planet. And one of my favorite quotes of all time that Holly gets sick of me quoting is from a wonderful woman called Adrienne Marie Brown, who says, "You're always practicing something. And so you're either practicing upholding the world as it is, or you're practicing shifting into the world as you want it to be." And I'm going to pass over to Holly now, who's going to just dive deeply into the triple wellbeing approach as ways of practicing in our own lives and in our learning context, ways to shift our world towards a healthier horizon for people and planet. So over to you, Holly.
Cool. Thanks, Rach. So, I mean, what we're going to present here is not ThoughtBox. We haven't come up with it as ThoughtBox. This isn't something that we've just pulled out of the air. As Rachel says, there's a huge amount of depth research behind this, and one of the big leaders and influences in coming up with this approach and this framework is nature itself. That actually the research shows that the indigenous and intuitive knowledge shows that actually when we start to bring in this way of practicing and living, it helps all life and all the healthy systems to flourish. And so I'm just going to talk you through the way that we've kind of helped to lay this out in an approach or a framework that is hopefully very tangible and easily applicable, both in your personal lives and professionally and organizationally too. So when we talk about triple well-being in action, we start with this idea of these three care practices that Rachel mentioned. So the practices of self-care and looking at how we can nurture our own inner worlds. The practice of people care, so looking at what that looks like when we build caring communities, both locally and also considering what our community might look and feel like globally as well. And then looking at earth care and actually how we build that relationship and that connection with the wider natural world around us and really start to nurture the connections there. So these are the three care practices that the entry points to, or the underpinning moments of triple well-being. We then bring these three care practices together with three different entry points, so three different ways in that we can start to practice self-care, people care, and earth care. And again, these are sort of well-known entry points and ways to really deeply connect with the world. The first entry point is that of the head, so starting to think critically and contextually, really starting to engage with what's going on in the world and how we relate to it. We then also use the entry point of the heart, so starting to tune in into that feeling and that sensing emotion, and how we can kind of enter into this caring, connective space through the heart. And the third entry point is the hands. And when we talk about the hands as an entry point, we're talking about that understanding of systems, relationships, about connections and relationships, and really engaging with the world around us. And so this triple wellbeing approach is about bringing together these practices of self-care, people care, and earth care with the skills of thinking, feeling, and relating. And by doing this, we support this deep connection with ourselves, with each other, and the wider natural world. And this deep connection really allows this healthier way of being to flourish. Now, just really quickly, we wanted to share that at ThoughtBox, the ways in which we empower and enable educators to build more triple wellbeing into their work is through our courses. And we have a variety of training programs that we have on offer. Our resources, so whether that's our curriculum, which is over 400 editable lessons, our triple wellbeing card deck, which if anyone has been on a training with us, you may have noticed our triple wellbeing cards, and our story kits as well. So that's another way in. And then we also have a triple wellbeing community. So really allowing a community of practice to come together and work together. I've slipped in one of my favourite quotes. Seeing as Rachel got Adrienne Marino Brown, I wanted to share this quote before setting our provocation question for the breakout rooms today. And it's this quote from Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, who says, "The world is not a problem to be solved. It is a living being to which we belong." I think so often for those of us working in this sector, it can feel like we are engaging with these huge crises and that it's a problem that we're going to have to fix. It can feel very scary, it can feel quite draining, and it can feel very disempowering. But when we start to tune in instead into those places of connection and those spaces where we can start to really build care and connection into our work and into our lives, it starts to be a more joyous space, somewhere that energizes us, empowers us, and allows us to keep going and to keep nurturing, keep creating these ways of being that ripple out and do in effect change. And so the question that we wanted to pose today for the breakout room discussions is, where are the opportunities that you can find to create more triple wellbeing in our contexts? So thinking about the context that you are in, whether that's personally, professionally, organisationally, where are those opportunities for you to bring in more self-care, more people care, more earth care? And so that's the conversation that we're going to have, and then we'll all be coming back together to share a little bit. So I think George is going to send everyone out into breakout rooms now. I don't know for how long.
We'll do probably around 10 minutes, Holly. Holly and Rachel, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll enjoy discussing this self-care, people care, earth care in our rooms, and where there's room for that in our work. I'm just having a look. George, well, you should get an invitation in a little moment. It's just coming up to past, so we should get 10 minutes or so, which always feels far too short, but hopefully you'll make some connections. Do you want to just repeat the question again, Holly, for everybody? Sure. The provocation, that might be an idea. So
it's, where are the opportunities to create more triple wellbeing in our learning contexts or in our context? I'll put the question in the chat.
Thank you, and thank you for letting us all come and join these conversations. I wonder if anyone would just like to quickly share or capture what was explored in your particular breakout rooms. I know we just had Liz and where are we? I've lost my pictures of everyone. Liz and David and Karen and I had a really interesting discussion going all over the place. Just because I've been with you, can I put one of you on the spot? Do you want to just quickly share very quickly what we explored, and we'll pop to the other two breakout rooms afterwards?
Okay, I'll go very briefly then, in that we started focusing a little bit, or I did, on the topic of self-care and how I very much don't think that that's at the forefront of my work, and maybe needs to be more, both for the young people we're working with and, as we've just been talking about teachers and their well-being, so that they then have the energy and impetus to do all the other things that we're asking of them. Thanks.
Thank you. David, you're unmuted. Did you want to add anything? Feel free.
Am I muted?
No, you're unmuted, but if you wanted to add anything, you're very welcome.
Just very quickly, yeah. I mean, just the opportunity this could be expanded and developed for all of society as well as education. There's a need to move to a wider picture. I just briefly mentioned the fact there's not even a wellbeing measure in the children's wellbeing in schools bill right now, which we're trying to address. And scarily, if you do look at a measure like that, like the mental health quotient measure, we're actually positioned pretty well bottom of the world in the UK through driver motivation, mood, all of the criteria, 6 criteria, the mental health quotient measures globally. We're actually the bottom of the world league tables. And not only that, we're an outlier when it comes to driver motivation. Now, that's something we do really need to address, both for our young people and also our adult populations as well. So, love this work and great conversations.
Thank you, David. Again, some really good provocations in where we are and where we need to be shifting to. I'm afraid I haven't got an idea of the other breakout rooms and who was in them, but would anyone like to speak about what was sort of happening in your conversations from another room?
I'm happy to, and then pass over to my team.
Thank you, Penny.
We talked about the relationship between kind of personal, social, environmental well-being and how we manifest that in different ways. So, for instance, Adrian was talking about, walking meetings rather than being side by side in a walking meeting. I have a green line in my diary every day to go for a walk. So, a meeting with myself in nature. We talked about the idea of having meetings with food, with tea and coffee outside. Kathy was very keen to say yes to everything that she's invited to. I thought that was lovely. I'm trying to say no to a lot of things, but in a nice way, just to protect. And I think Adrian's in a choir, which gives him brilliant well-being, a feeling of well-being. Personally, I swim in clean lakes outside and in forests. And one example was our Forest of Imagination Network. It's a kind of creative ecology of people connected. So we're always aware of our personal, social, environmental well-being. Thinking on behalf of the planet is a phrase I use a lot. So I'm going to pass to my team. Anyway, what have I missed? I didn't take notes.
That was pretty comprehensive, Penny. No, that was great. I think that sums us up. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Amazing. And in this sort of ethos of the speed, we're going to whip to another breakout room. Anyone want to quickly summarize what your conversation was?
I don't know whether we were the final group, but I raised the point about the challenge about trying to embed these fundamental issues when we have the speed of change that we do within education, and constant change through curriculum or government policy or white papers, whatever it may be. And I think that's probably at the heart of where people keep saying the world's speeding up or we're changing things quicker, but I think that's a real challenge within education, is how finding the time to properly embed something before jumping to the next thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Rich. And Holly just reminded me there was one more breakout room. Anyone want to speak from the last one?
I don't mind trying that.
Thank you, Amanda.
Liz, do you want to go?
No, you go.
Okay. Well, it was interesting. We shared a lot of the projects we're all involved in. So that was useful, especially with the idea of being creativity, imagination, to address and bring these different cares together. But again, the same challenges that have just been mentioned, and also the cognitive dissonance from Claire Arnott's work, Global Action Plan, and the sort of potential contradictions between being consumers and at the same time caring for nature and everything else. So that's a bit of a summary, but we had a good exchange of our different projects and how we're all trying to already address this, really.
Thank you. And again, it's just knowing quite a lot of in this call, this work is happening all across the board. If okay, I would like to just possibly give the last word to the late, great Sir Ken Robinson. But Holly also might have something else to say, so I won't assume. But in so many avenues of his work, he talks about culture and recognizes that the culture is something we can create ourselves. We don't need to wait for that to be given to us. And he said, successful schools don't focus on output, they focus on culture, in the same way that regenerative farmers focus on the health of the soil. Because if you get the culture right, everything else takes care of itself. So whilst I hear the limitations on things changing all the time and things coming in, we create the culture that we are moving into. And there's everything we can do ourselves and in the communities that we're part of to shift that culture. Lee, I'm passing over to you, just so I don't know who else to give to.
I'm just going to pass it straight to Kathy to wrap us up.
All right, lovely. Can we just thank you so much for coming? And I know it feels a little breathless, but we have found that half an hour everyone can manage. And I hope that you've all enjoyed being here today and just picking up on the idea of culture that Rachel was just talking about. We had a previous speaker, Ruth Taylor from the Common Cause Foundation, who often talks about tending the cultural soil. And in that spirit, I have two things to leave you with, and I'm going to do them back to front because I always forget the last one. And the last one is, if you have something that you are doing, some project or practice or provocation that you have that you'd like to come, you feel you can cope with the breathlessness of the 15-minute presentation, and a question to all of us, please just do get in touch. You can do that via the Our Shared World website. And the last thing is our next speaker, who is on the 4th of March. And we're really delighted to be welcoming Professor Aaron Stibber from Gloucestershire College, who talks about this idea of the stories that we live by. And he calls stories the secret reservoir of values. And all of his work centers around this idea of eco-narratives and ecosophies and basically the powerful force of language in the way that we nurture those cultural soils. He's a fascinating speaker, and there are lots of links to free resources for teaching and learning as well that he has online that are really, really, truly excellent. So I hope you'll be able to make time to come with us. We're only 4 minutes over. Give yourselves all a round of applause and thank you very much for coming.